Hey,
Hey, how's it going?
going well. How about you?
Pretty good, thanks.
Whew, actually, no. Sorry, that's my regular answer. No,
Yeah.
I've been going through a fair bit with all the stuff that's going on in the U.S. and the whole prejudice thing and
Oh,
intent versus impact and whatever. Uh, which is, there's no whatever about it specifically. Um, it's more like I'm trying to, yeah, I don't know. My brain has been trying to figure out the structure underneath the messiness, and and it's been a little difficult. I mean, it's almost like I'm it's like I've been doing this for a long time, the whole morality bit and the whole trying to understand what's at play and what's going on inside people's minds. How does it all fit together? How does it make sense? And my usual take is very different than a lot of other people. It's definitely not ideologically informed or biased. I just want to know why people do the things they do, instead of just saying people have to, this must stop. I posted about that a few days ago. This cannot happen again. It's like, no, this is this is never going to happen the way you just asked for it, because we don't have what it takes to make sure it never happens again.
right.
So every time you just say, here's the bar. Okay, well, we're going to cross it. Oh, here's the bar. Yeah, we're going to cross it again. And it's like, okay. And people are like, no, we're done. And we're like, the more done you are, if you're not really, the more morally done you are, if you're not really done on the inside, the more it's going to be painful.
Yeah. I mean, it's a nowhere conversation. It's why I generally don't approach it, except with every once in a while when I'm feeling mischievous. I'll approach it with comedy. Like, I don't know if you noticed the
Yeah.
meme that I posted. I reshared it from somebody else. It has a picture of Dr. Evil on the phone, and he says, "The pandemic isn't working. Start the race war." Um, so
Yeah.
it's not very funny, but it it's trying to step outside of the reality box that everybody seems to fall into on one side or the other, which is my
Yeah.
intention.
For what? For the being funny?
Well, being funny is generally not where people go when they're polarized, so I'm trying to like snap them out of
Well,
like a pattern interrupt. And of course it means something to them, so
well, I
I
mean,
don't want to dismiss it. That's not my point, but it's often taken that way.
right. Well, the funniness is, has historically been a way for people to look at things that are difficult to look at.
Sure.
And oh, what's the name of the guy? This black guy. Oh, okay, hang on. Sticks and Stones, Netflix. What's his name? Dave Chappelle.
Oh
So
yeah.
Dave Chappelle has a show on Netflix, as one of his stand-up comedy thing on Netflix called Sticks and Stones, and he has a lot of things to say about social justice and about trans versus all the other letters of the alphabet that are part of the LGBTQ and so on. and and he's very non-politically correct. Like, even just the idea of being political correctness as out loud jokes.
Yeah.
It's like the king saying, it's like some version of a moral king out there saying, you shall not laugh about me, right? It's like the king saying, I'm going to kill you if you laugh about me. and
Yes.
and so even the jester is no longer allowed to make fun of the king.
Yeah.
And the jester was the only one allowed to make fun of the king, because it kind of gave people a way of laughing at the king without, but they were laughing at the jester.
Right.
But now with the idol, with the more kind of moral thinking, or the moral sort of religion that is out there,
Hmm.
you can't even laugh. You can't laugh at stuff because it's all serious stuff, and
Right.
laughing about it is obscene.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really, really tricky. But I highly recommend the Sticks and Stone thing. It's hilarious, and
I love Dave
you know,
Chappelle, anything he does, so I'm looking forward to it.
yeah, he does have this one joke about, like, how basically he has some text where he uses the word nigger, and and at some point, like his people or the network that he was doing a show for goes back into his files from like 15 years ago or something like that, and they found that he uses the word nigger, and he's like, what's wrong with nigger? And she's like, well, it's wrong. He's like, well, I am a nigger, so what's wrong with me using that word? And obviously there's no answer to that, because he did, they didn't want him to use a word that could refer to him if he wanted to.
Wow.
So yeah, it's funny because it's not funny.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it points to people being unable to see the darkness and the shadows in their own belief systems.
That's the blaring unaddressed area. I mean, without shadow work, we're never going to get anywhere with this.
Yeah.
It's a nowhere conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's half the reason I use the approach that I do, where mostly I'm completely neutral. And then every once in a while, I'll bring out something that's comedy based on one side or the other. I don't care which side. And that's the point.
Right.
Because
right.
There is no side. It's supposed, like, I want to take, like, for example, JP Sears, his work is great because he makes fun of the stuff that he teaches. What a great way to be, to make a point and really live it.
Right. Well, it has a, and I agree with it to some degree, is it has a loosening effect. Kind of loosens belief systems so that, better belief systems can be acquired. Although at the same time, what I've been realizing is that it's not clear to me to what degree people can take on these new beliefs if they don't have the intelligence for it.
Yeah. If they have no framework for it, they have nothing to hang their hat on, right?
That's right. So if you look at the Keegan's neurological levels of neurological development, what happens is that, only some humans can get to level 4, which is, looking at like the greater system of, them plus other people in relationships, and relationships being asymmetrical. Instead of, oh, I do this for you, you need to do this for me. That's like the equality. And equity could be said, or fairness could be said, to actually up levels that to, okay, when I feel it's fair and you feel it's fair, which may not look like the same thing on both sides. So that's great. But also there's this sense that it only looks at us as a system. But it doesn't. It's very difficult to start looking at the world being just there's, when people talk about systemic anything, they think there's one system, but there's really a bazillion systems systems of systems interlocking with each other. And it's massively complex, and there's not one thing you can do to solve it.
Yeah.
Anything you do will be a hybrid approach. Anything effective you do will be some hybrid approach that keeps on changing.
Sure. Because it most closely resembles the ever-changing reality that we can't possibly put in a box, but we do it to understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, and in some ways, it's almost like the more we know, let me just close the door. The more we know, the more it gets us in trouble, because we have more ways that we can try to interject into the system to try to make it better. But at the same time, there's, there is no end to how deep we can go down that rabbit hole. I mean, there might be an effective limit. I think the effective limit, so I'm back to the limit. I think the effective limit is our intelligence as a population, which limits our capacity to grow as a civilization and a society. In terms of the neurological levels of development, to be able to consider a certain level of complexity. If the population as a whole can't consider that, then it won't be able to evolve to that level.
Yeah.
Now, leaders can conceive of it, and will engage the population in any sort of game of, I'm going to give you what you, I'm going to give you what you need or what you want. Hopefully you'll take it as what you want. And then maybe, and then when we'll grow this society to something greater than it can be. But in the process, people can't get too upset by how much either conformity or individuality is being expressed by the system. Otherwise, they're going to feel like the system is getting out of hand.
Yeah.
And they're more likely to look at this system as actually being less than more, because more is not comprehensible. So they'll look at it as less.
Mm.
They'll look at it as previous stage rather than next stage, because the next stage is beyond their capacity to comprehend.
Oh, right. Like the maturity, essentially the maturity post you put up there that I commented on.
Oh yeah, that's it. Exactly. And so in some ways, what people talk about when they do conspiracy, one version of what people are speaking to when they think of conspiracy theories is that there are people who are smarter that are trying to drag a whole population of people who are not
right
down a path that's better, and by trying to be as forthcoming as possible, but at the same time pulling strings behind the scenes, because if you try to be forthcoming in a way that says we're going to go to a place that you can't understand, it's not going to work.
Right. Yeah, the resistance principle there. I mean, because they don't understand it, they're going to resist it like crazy. So that's theoretically, right, by making sure they don't fully understand it, they'll be more likely to go toward it based on their own moral, drives.
Right. Well, that's the ideal, right? The ideal is you support people in moving according to their level of development. But if you try to get them to move beyond the level of development, they will start to see this as controlling, and they won't understand it, and they want chip. They want. It's not clear to me that everybody who wants to graduate can graduate.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you there.
And so it's more likely that they're going to look at it as something's trying to control me for their own evil ploys, which is also possible. I mean, I think it's possible.
Sure.
I mean, I think it's possible to be smarter and to try to pull people in a direction that actually isn't supportive of them. It's anybody's guess.
Right. Right.
And it's also more likely that it's going to be perceived as something of a lesser development.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
So, why was I talking about this?
Because this is what's on your mind.
That's what's on my mind. And so I'm trying to crunch that. And also something else was around bias. And when people get scared, that relates to our conversation. When people get scared, their capacity to understand what's going on is lessened because they're scared. And so they revert back to the quickest answers they can get, which is, are you with me or are you against me?
Yeah.
The in-grouping, out-grouping of bias kind of rises up to the surface because now your life is in danger, or your sense of security, which could also be your sense of potentially losing privilege.
Yeah. Wow.
Because it is a sense of security. I know what I get. Now, I was talking with Kaine about how she feels like she could go much lower than me in terms of privilege, because she's lived, in a family where they were not living paycheck to paycheck. They were living from their dad busking, which is dollar to dollar to dollar to dollar.
Wow.
And she would start busking. She started busking with him or separately from him when she was 6 to help making money. So she can live on very little.
Wow. So
what qualifies for her as living on little would sound much more awful to me, because I haven't had to live there. If I had gotten to live there, then I would say, okay, that's kind of my bottom line. She wouldn't want to go lower than that. So yes. That's our lower range of privilege, so to speak.
I have a direct example of that in my first marriage. My wife, mother of my kids, had
Mhm.
no idea what it was like to go without food or to be in poverty.
Yeah.
And I had already done that when I was a kid. So when we went through that, because we had kids so young, it was really difficult to support our budget. Um, I'm realizing now she probably went through quite a trauma because her whole personality shifted.
Yeah.
And it was just like the world was coming to an end. To me, it was like, well, I've done this before.
Yeah. You survive.
Yeah, it was, I knew it was going to be okay. As a matter of fact, I was actually a little more comfortable there.
Yeah, and that's the other piece with kindness. She was like, I've never had this much money in my bank account. It's weird. I don't know what to do with that. And I have a similar situation right now because of COVID. I'm not spending, and so money, I have more money in my bank account I've ever had in my life. It's strange. I just don't know. I don't, there's money there, and I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And it's strangely comforting. I know when I passed a certain amount, I was like, oh, now I feel like I've reached a place of no stress around money. Like I could live a few months and actually not worry about it. I could
Mm.
I could live on less because we've lived on little when I was growing up, partially because of that, and partially because of that I feel more comfortable
Mm.
with for the longest time I was living with $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 in my bank account,
Yeah,
and it would go up and down all the way down to close to zero, and would come back, and
sure.
and now it's like I'm not even close to that. And after I pass that level of, I call it comfort, I call it security,
Sure.
which it will only keep me going for a few months, but for me I felt it in my body. Now that I've passed that level because of loans and because of credit cards and other things, now I'm like, I don't even know what that land looks like. It's the land of beyond privilege as I've known it most of my
Mm.
life. And she's
Sure.
actually in a similar situation.
Wow.
Now, of course, I could invest and I could do things with my money, which I'm sure people who win the lottery they don't know what to do with that money, so they blow it on random shit.
Yeah.
So all of this to say is, like, I think we have like a known range, which is our sort of our comfort zone. Or there's the sort of the survival zone, and then you normally have your little poster that kind of shows that, and there's like the survival zone, and then there's the okay, we're okay zone, we're comfortable or safe, and then there's the zone beyond that. So
Mm.
I suspect that nobody in society would want to go lower than their lowest range.
Sure.
That would be a loss of privilege, and I suspect that nobody would do anything to purposefully go lower than that.
Of
It
course.
would feel like death. It would feel like below survival.
Yes.
Even though, it's clear that it wouldn't necessarily mean survival. I mean, obviously, you live with little food or little money for food, and you're still here. So
Yeah.
you can compare yourself to others, but the feeling inside is what stops you from actually going lower than survival, which I think is an adaptive trait.
Mm.
Like, of course, if there was a war or if there was a civil war or something happened, like, we would adapt.
Sure.
But as quickly as we can, we would try to go back to the minimum survival range that we know, because it's
Mm.
a known territory.
Sure. That makes sense.
So anyway, going back to bias, I think what we defend is our known range.
That's a really cool definition.
And we use bias to actually keep people inside of our in group that help us stay in our known comfortable range,
Yeah.
and we keep outside the people that with whom an engagement fucks with our sense of safety or sense of range. And the
That
same
makes
is true with
perfect sense.
having
That makes perfect sense.
yeah, and this also shows why people have issues around having too much money, like what they want, even consider what it would be like, and there's a lot of coaches who actually help people with, their shadows around money, their sense of, oh, I don't want to have too much, or what does it mean when you have too much? And for Kaine, it was like, okay, when she's within that particular low range of however many hundreds of dollars or thousands, it means that she's doing okay. But when it's beyond that, like, somehow she feels weird about it, or she feels guilty about it, like somebody else should have it.
Right. Yeah, just that comfort zone. It's bizarre.
Yeah. And then beyond that, there's the conversation that I've been having. So this is all stuff that's in my mind, and it's great that you're recording it because I think I want a copy of it.
Okay, cool.
Because I want to post some snippets of it. And then what's the other difficult bit is when you is what do you do with privilege when you have it? When you have more than you need, what do you do with it? Or do you just naturally kind of upgrade your privilege to the next rung that you're not going to go below, which is also an adaptive trait, right? Like all animals are trying to be as adaptive as possible, and they try not to go down. And so, and that brings me to the conversation of to what degree you're willing to give away your privilege in favor of somebody else. And what's the exchange rate?
To me, that has to do with how widely we expand our identity. Like we have the singular identity, and then we have the relational, and then family and community and so on. The further out we expand that identity, to me, it seems logical that we would be more comfortable with what might look to the individual identity as giving away privilege, but really it's expanding it and sharing it.
Towards the us, the greater us?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, for example, family. Like, oh, I'm willing to give $1,000 to my sister because she's in need. Oh, okay, because she's part of the us.
Yes.
Or my friends, my circle of friends, or my girlfriend, or my son, or who is worthy of consideration in that, basically, that us group.
And what if our tribal, identification can be widened to, let's just go all the way to all of humanity.
Right. Well, it's tricky because all of humanity is way more than we can conceive of, and it's way more than we can handle. Like you can't give your money to all of humanity, but you can give to a few, and you can divide it up in hundreds of dollars or tens of dollars, or you can divide it up in whenever you meet somebody on the street and they want money, you give them $20.
But
the question is, where do you stop? What is the internal sense that now it's time to stop? That, okay, you've given enough, but you can't give more. Like where does that moral sense comes in? And I suspect it comes in because of privilege. And I suspect it comes in, and by privilege, I mean like the capacity to be adaptive.
What if how we define giving is the issue? Like what if it's about material things versus
like time, attention, privilege, consideration? I mean, it seems like out there in social media, it seems like giving consideration is actually that's very consideration and empathy is actually like morally valuable.
Oh, for sure.
Like when people say, oh, you don't care about blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, actually, you don't care about a lot of people either. You've just chosen the people that you care about, and everybody else can go die, and you don't care.
Right.
You've picked your group, I picked my group, and we have different groups.
Yes.
And how we support these groups. So, and some of them are more morally in vogue than the others.
What if we differentiate what is our survival group? So in that case, the tangible resources would be something we express and give freely because that's a part of our identity. But what if there's another way of discerning you could call it the secure aspect that we can grow into of flexibility beyond our survival tribal group? So it's not that we're giving physical resources that we have limited amounts of, like time and money and, empathy even, the amount of time and attention that we can give people to give them empathy directly. What if it's a more grand, but generalized? Beyond a certain point, it has to be generalized. And we have to address what we can tangibly address because they're within our group. So it's like kind of like as an individual, we honor our primal animal and we expand into what's possible, as far as our morals as a human being. But what
So
if that is the individual identity and there's a community identity version of that?
yeah, I mean that's great, but again, the same question shows up for me. It's like, where do you stop? At what point, at the end of the day, do you say I've done enough, or I've given enough of my attention, consideration, money, or just prayers? I mean, for some people, prayers is a valuable thing. I mean, for me, prayers is just it is just as is just as meaningful as consideration for the people I have no direct connection to.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I mean, it's like I pray for the people. I wish the best for people, for some people, but not others. But the people I really give my time and attention and money or space or energy are the people that are closest to me. And that's why I've been advocating that people really pick one person that you're going to give your heart to, not just as a partner, but people that you're really willing to support pro bono, or just because, or relation, even for money. I mean, the service agreement doesn't need to include money, but it can, and it can actually be a powerful source of accountability for the person that you're supporting.
Sure.
If that's indicated. But the thing is, there's always a point of stopping. And so
Sure.
what I'm curious about is, and so, okay, so what I think the point of stopping is the edge of your capacity of our capacity to engage. As an avoidant, I tend to focus more on the people that are closer to me. I think anxious tend to expand way further away as a form of hyper awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And avoidance do the opposite as a form of avoidance. Like, I can't deal with everyone's needs. I can barely deal with my own. I'm going to deal with 1, 2, 3. I mean, my dance card is like this much.
Right.
Which doesn't mean there's not a whole lot of output in the process, but it is a kind of output. And I think on the other, so the avoidant will tend to go in the direction of reducing the amount or quantity or frequency of needs to a select number of people, and anxious will sort of like lean the other direction. They'll lean out into the world. And of course, the world will not be able to meet their needs properly.
Right.
But I think that there's a blessing there, which is they will have to start to learn to own their own needs, because the world will not be able to reflect back and meet their needs in any good way as the world.
Have you ever heard of The Go-Giver? That book? It's basically a parable. It's basically a story that conveys 5 basic principles of giving and receiving. It's the reciprocation principle, and how when you provide a certain amount of value, and it's done in a specific way, that's reflected back as monetary gain if you're able to structure it well. So what I'm seeing in this conversation is a possibility of looking at the valuable pieces on both sides, kind of like I wrote in that article, Anxious Avoidant Dance. We both have the piece of the other, that we essentially project out with our outward, talents, awarenesses, gifts, what the other person needs, and they project that that's the part that they want to avoid, but really they need it.
Yeah.
And my point being that, so let's take an example of expanding out into the world. Like, let's call that the anxious box, right? Expanding very far out into the world and not necessarily getting the reciprocation back, right? And so learning that there's this focus on the internal circles of people that need to be addressed, so that the actual tangible physical needs are addressed.
Right.
Whereas the intention of, for example, like the Master Your Mind and Body series, that totally fits into the anxious box. I have no intention or structure to make any money back from that, but I want to give value. And as a result, I'm also noticing that much further that I've stretched into that anxious realm has resulted in, well, not very many people, compared to how many, if I structured it well, actually have seen it.
Right.
I didn't give it the structure so it can actually reach so the intention is there, and maybe the everything is there to give to the world, and that's the intention, but I didn't structure it in a way where I actually meet people where they are in those smaller steps. so that they can
Mm-hmm.
recognize the value. So it's like, that would be a tangible example to me of where I missed the avoidance structure I needed in order
Right.
to make that really hit. And that's actually what I'm taking time off for, is to learn how, okay, how do I make PDFs? How do I make this into smaller pieces? How do I actually make this something that people can see the value?
Right.
Not just people who are already well versed in this stuff. It's like, well, to you and I, it's like, well, obviously these tools are valuable, and we can, we're already doing our own practices in it.
Yeah. It's
But to get it to
interesting.
the average person, it's like, they're going to need to get those small steps, and I need to learn how to do that.
It's interesting because I can see the sort of the overgiver feel of the anxious versus the undergiver version of the avoidant. Like avoidant it might use more structure because it's gonna allow it's gonna maximize the return for the least amount of time and effort.
Yes.
Which is also why, from the completely different angle, why I haven't created that many handouts either.
Okay.
Because
can you explain more of
well, the handouts is like requires more energy and more attention, and I haven't been able I've my attention's been sort of what do you call that, my attention's been used up by everything that's already happening in my life, because my attention is limited, because I'm not very good at expanding it.
Okay.
Plus, I have a son, which I think uses up like twice as much as usual. Although he's much better, he's so much better now. I mean, he's so sweet. It's like he's able to hold boundaries so much better, and also he's able to understand when I'm having a hard time. And like, I mean, obviously it's adaptive, and there's a growth process between the two of us.
Sure.
But it's really, anyway, it's really great. So having said that, it's only when I have a lot of extra space around me in my consciousness that I can sit down and say, all right, I'm going to create a handout now. Or when I created the stages of secure, and immediately after that I created the dance of anxious and avoidant, all these details have been arising in my consciousness for years before I got to that sort of magical point of, whoa, I'm going to create it now. And it's like everything was ready. It was like I had all the colors on my palette to do the painting.
Yes.
And it took years to accumulate all the colors until I was ready. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that for an avoidant, it's like there isn't necessarily a lot of because the bandwidth is already low, things fill up the bandwidth more quickly.
Got it. That makes sense.
So to have enough bandwidth, which usually looks like be able to concentrate for myself, like where I'm far away from the demands of my family, even if like it's big difference. Like right now I'm in the front room of my house and I can hear my family do stuff, which kind of, is distracting to me because I can feel their interactions and I can feel their needs through the door. And it's better with the door. So that's why we made the wall and put the door in. And then when I'm downstairs in our Airbnb unit, then it's a different experience. I'm like, oh, I'm further away. And I'm able to feel like I've got more spaciousness. But to really do the trick, plus or minus the occasional magical moment where I created those two infographics, I would need to be away for a certain amount of time, where I'm like, I can just kind of land into myself and allow myself to kind of really consider everything, do all the things that are calling my name, and then engage with those pieces, like doing handouts, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it was a completely different mindset for me to do the Master Your Mind and Body series than this space that I'm realizing I need at least this and maybe next week off to get my head in a space where I can actually produce all the PDFs that will go with all of those days. And I mean, that's 49 fucking days. I love doing the videos. It's like, that just comes. It's like all of these years of tools that I've accumulated, and it's
riffing off on it.
Yeah. And somehow it just all formed in this wonderful way. I wasn't expecting it. It was like, wow, my unconscious kind of had a format already, and I just capitalized on it. But like, to actually do the work of writing things down, even though that'll arguably take a third of the time, I'm dreading it.
Yeah, totally get it. Totally get it. I mean, you know, I suspect, I mean, okay, sorry, I mean, like many thoughts going in my head at the same time. One recommendation is hire somebody to do it. And, you know, maybe Danielle is it if you have that kind of relationship, or just tell somebody, like, I'll give you, I mean, obviously, you know, 49 days is a long time. So you know, I don't know if you're going to re-listen to all of these things, but, you know, if you wanted to do like one track all the Mondays, I mean, maybe you can hire somebody to listen to all of that and extract their, kind of write some notes.
Yes.
And, you know, might be worth the money as an initial sort of, because otherwise you'll have to listen to it. And maybe somebody's super into it. Maybe somebody in the attachment community is like, yeah, that would be super cool. I'll get paid. And plus I'm going to be learning. Why not? You know, so
Okay.
maybe somebody's up for it and can kind of demonstrate to you that they would take good notes.
Okay, cool. That's a great idea. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And when we had started, my friend Holly, I think way back when we started these conversations and I was interviewing you, she, you know, I had hired her to do that.
Oh, okay.
And you know, she did extract some stuff. We never ended up using it, but it was just sort of like getting the ball rolling in around, oh, what would it be like to have, because the other piece too is when you put in what you put in the description of the video can be really helpful. You know, at minute, you know, 7:30, we talk about blah blah blah, and at minute 11 we talk about blah blah blah, and it can give people a sense of where to go look in a long video that's an hour and a half. Is it useful? I don't necessarily know. If do people use it? I don't know, but it can be useful in understanding what's going on. Now, here's the other piece: is the Otter app, Otter.ai, OTTER, will record, you know, even Zoom calls or videos. So if you have the video, you basically put it in your Dropbox and connect with the Otter AI connector and the Dropbox connector. And then it will actually go look at that video and turn it into text.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Is it expensive?
It's like $99 a year.
Oh, wow. That's no problem at all.
It's nothing. Up to a certain number of minutes. So if you want to go, I think it's 6,000 minutes a month.
Okay.
Something
right.
like that.
I'll just break it up if I have to.
Yeah, so it's, you know, it's doable to actually at least extract the text, so you can kind of skim through it and search for keywords or just see what was talked about. But again, it's like hours of conversation, and so yeah. But the point is that if you're comfortable with your material, extracting the important tidbits, you know, could work really well. Or somebody could watch it and say, this is what I got out of it. So at least somebody else with not your brain with all the details in it will extract for themselves what they got out of it. And so it's not necessarily taking notes for everything that was said, but it was more about what are the highlights that you would want to write notes about, or do you want to make a handout, or maybe you have somebody listen to it and you know, just tell them like, what are the notes you would need to, you know, write notes for the purpose of using the information that's given to you. And then you go and then you take those notes. So it's not like write everything. It's not the point. The point is, if this person, you know, let's tell this person like, okay, you know, Secure Saturday. So, you know, go listen to the first one and just take notes so that this is so you remember the things you need to remember about it. And what you're learning in the conversation, and then you can take that and turn it into a handout potentially.
Cool. That's
so
great.
I mean, I've created this document, which is sort of the basis for, you know, all the Secure Saturdays that we've done, except the first one, I think. And so I've been adding to it. You know, I've got like, what are the behaviors of the different qualities of secure, and I've been adding to it. And I might even add more qualities, because, you know, it's just, and it's actually turned into a handout as I was doing it.
Cool.
So that's cool too. Okay, so question is, sorry, I'm kind of going on a roll because my brain has been full of things and I needed to offload, and I know you can get it. So thanks for your listening. I feel like I'm talking a lot.
You're welcome. It's all good.
Okay, great. And I love that we're recording this, because this feels really good to actually use.
For sure.
If you're willing.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Okay, perfect.
At Fuzzy Philippe?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, or you can send the link, and
Oh, right.
but yeah, ideally, if I have the actual video, then I can actually chop it up, because there's some pieces at the beginning about about bias and things like that that I want to extract like a chunk at the beginning, and essentially. Okay,
Cool.
the last bit that I have is I'm thinking, partially because it's hard for me to wrap my brains around practices. One idea would be we start with more somatic practices.
Great.
To bring secure. Okay, so I mean, I think it would look like stuff you can do consciously that will calm your nervous system.
Yep.
I think that's the first thing. I mean, anybody who goes into their coping mechanisms in some kind, either anxiety or avoidance, which you can start to feel. You can start to be like, ugh, or you can start to be like, ugh,
Yes.
One of those two coping mechanisms. What can you do to actually calm the nervous system? Beyond like a warm bath and a walk around the park.
It could be a simple binary conversation in terms of, like, no matter what attachment style we're talking about some degree of avoidance or anxiousness, right?
Yeah.
As far as anything that's non-secure or disorganized, it's going to be somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So anytime you have anxious type of things come up, these are the basic body, mind, emotional, even spiritual practices,
Right.
and do the same thing on the avoidance side. And maybe if we just both riff on what we know from both sides, we could just sort of go back and forth for each side, and then maybe have a blending conversation of, not only are these the individual practices for each, when we tend to be more anxious, well, we need more structure, we need more resources to organize and calm, right? When we're on the more avoidant side, we need to allow space and also gradually titrate, bit by bit, more feeling, right?
Right. Or the feelings of others.
Right.
Because it could be our own, which then, because if the feelings of others are overwhelming, then you can't feel yourself. Okay. All right. So I'm going to ponder that a little bit more, and
Cool.
I'll bring what I have. I think I might go down the road of the Journey to Secure, like self-care cards.
Okay.
I was also going to look at, what we said we were going to do is sort of accumulate. Okay, I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to look at the qualities of secure and how they and extract the things that could help.
Will you have these written down? If so, could you send them to me?
Yeah, I'm going to send you the link right now.
Awesome. And then I'll just look it over, have it in front of me while we're talking, and that way I have some sort of map that we're both looking at.
Well, so what I'm realizing is that all the qualities of secure have some basically there's some engagement on needs, right? So self-care is taking care of your own needs. Interdependence is understanding that you and others have needs that you have to collaborate on. Sovereignty is it's self-responsibility, which goes back to taking care of your own needs. Mutuality is we both have needs and we have to make it work. Okay, that's collaboration again. So taking care of your own needs, collaborating around needs. Good relationship to needs is validating needs, or some version of it, like needs are okay. Communicating, that's communicating needs. Emotional balance is finding, what's the best way to engage with needs. So for an anxious person, it's for anxious and secure, it's co-regulation. For avoidant, it's auto-regulation. So that's a basic engagement with needs. There's more. And rational and reasonable is sort of like understanding the needs. So
maybe the systemic framework.
The framework of needs, which also include the framework of needs of others that engages with our framework. So I've said them. I'm going to write them down because it's sort of like an overarching framework of it's a framework of engaging with needs, essentially. It's a framework of the different ways that needs need to be engaged with. God, like it's a meta view on the nature of our engagement with needs. That's
Cool.
the best way I can put it.
I like
And
that.
then within that, what are so within that, what are like for communication, what was it not non-radical honesty, is nonviolent communication is a perfect tool for communication.
Yes.
For understanding the landscape of needs, so to speak, or the network, no, what did you call it, the framework, understanding the framework, I think reading can be really good.
Yes.
Reading and having conversations with people about needs, or and the Facebook group. These are good places to go to actually ask questions and get responses and just kind of navigate the landscape. Let's see, emotional balance. That one is definitely about like asking for help for an anxious person, for co-regulation, and asking for space in a way that's healthy for an avoidant or disorganized, of course.
There's a key piece that I want to pull from Pete Walker's work when we discuss this, and I think emotional balance is a great topic to bring it under as an umbrella. He talks about, as we recover from a process that happens called splitting, when instead of expressing or feeling disappointment, we mentalize, which to me sounds like an avoidant trait. The three things that are helpful for coming back out of that are angering, that is getting in touch with the anger that connects us to our boundaries and the awareness of our boundaries in our bodies, right? So it's a body awareness that comes through angering.
Okay.
And grieving. So underneath the anger, we have the grieving of, the loss of, let's say, control or resources or people or whatever it is, a safe childhood, whatever it is that we are coming to terms with so that we can get back into feeling again. And the thing that anyone can engage in without having too much support is verbal ventilation. So it's angering, grieving, and verbal ventilation. And those three pieces are really helpful in and sort of the cornerstone of Pete Walker's work in recovery.
Okay, cool.
And it's in his book, The Tao of Fully Feeling.
Okay, cool. I'm writing those. I'm starting to write those bits. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna kind of finish that. It's gonna be at the bottom. Okay. I'll call the framework or landscape of needs. That's what I'm gonna call it for now.
Okay.
And I'm gonna try to piece out the different big pieces, and I think that's gonna give way to the different categories of self-care.
Okay, cool. Love it.
Right. Cool. I think that's it for me.
Cool. Same here. As soon as this video finishes processing from Zoom, I'll email it to you.
Okay, great. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, and actually, you're saving it on your computer, right?
It should be on my computer. Yes.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
This is not the computer I normally use, so I'm about to go through a searching process.
Okay, that's fine.
All right.
Okay, man. Thank you so much. That was great chatting with you.
Likewise. And we're on for 2 p.m., 11 a.m.
That's right.
Tomorrow. Cool.
Perfect. Okay.
All right.
I'll see you later. Bye.
Love you. Bye.